Before we begin, tell me down in the comments, where are you watching this video from? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story because what you're about to hear will touch your heart in ways you won't forget. It was past midnight when the sound of sirens split through the quiet streets of Atlanta. The rain was relentless, pounding against cracked sidewalks, turning everything into silver reflections of streetlights and chaos. On the corner of a rundown block stood a small clinic, lights still on, flickering, stubborn against the storm. Inside, a woman sat slumped at her desk, exhaustion written in every line of her face. Her name was Dr. Naomi Carter, 32 years old, overworked, underpaid, and one of the few doctors who never turned away a patient, no matter how poor. She wasn't supposed to be on call that night, but she couldn't say no when her colleague begged her to cover. The world didn't reward kindness, but Naomi couldn't stop giving it anyway. Just as she was about to close her files, the clinic door flew open with a bang. A teenage boy stumbled in, drenched from head to toe, his eyes wild with fear. "Please," he gasped, "you have to help my dad." Naomi jumped up immediately, rushing toward him. "Calm down, honey. Tell me what happened." The boy could barely catch his breath. He collapsed!" "At the hotel down the road. He's not breathing right." Without another word, Naomi grabbed her medical bag, threw on her raincoat, and followed him into the storm. The boy ran fast, his sneakers splashing through puddles, the rain soaking them both. They reached a sleek black car parked outside a luxury hotel, the kind Naomi had never stepped inside. Security guards stood near the entrance, tense and confused. "This way," the boy shouted, guiding her to the elevator. Her heart raced as they rushed up to the penthouse floor. The moment the doors opened, Naomi froze. The suite was massive, filled with marble floors, chandeliers, and expensive paintings. But on the floor near the window lay a man, unconscious, pale, struggling for air. She knelt beside him instantly, checking his pulse. "He's having a cardiac event," she said, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. "I need space now." The staff scrambled as she opened her bag and pulled out equipment. She began CPR, counting under her breath, sweat and rain mixing on her skin. The boy knelt beside her, tears streaming down his face. "Please save him." "He's my dad." Naomi looked up for just a moment and saw the fear in his eyes. Not the kind of fear rich kids usually have, but raw, desperate love. "I'm doing everything I can," she said softly, then pressed harder on the man's chest. After what felt like forever, the man gasped sharply, coughing and clutching his chest. Naomi leaned back, panting, relief washing over her. "He's breathing," she whispered. The boy cried out in relief, holding his father's hand. Naomi sat back on her heels, shaking, her heart still racing. The man she had just saved was none other than Richard Lennox, one of the most powerful billionaires in the country. Owner of Lennox Industries, a man whose face was plastered across magazines and financial news networks. Naomi stared for a moment, stunned. She had seen his picture before, a man of power and influence, the kind who moved the economy with a phone call. And now he was lying on the floor in front of her, weak and human. The next few minutes were a blur. Paramedics arrived, called by hotel security, but the boy refused to let anyone take over until Naomi confirmed his father was stable. "She saved him," he insisted. "She stays." Even as doctors in expensive suits arrived, she could feel their eyes, judgmental, dismissive, the kind that looked at her cheap shoes and brown skin and saw nothing worth respect. But the boy stood firm, his voice fierce. "She's the one who saved him. You wouldn't even know what to do if she wasn't here." His loyalty startled her. Naomi hadn't expected that kind of defense from a rich kid. By the time they loaded the billionaire into the ambulance, the boy turned back to her, still trembling. "Ma'am," he said, voice breaking, "thank you. I didn't know who else to call." Naomi offered him a tired smile. "You did the right thing, sweetheart." He hesitated, then whispered, "Please, don't leave." His eyes were pleading, full of something fragile, hope. Naomi sighed and nodded. "I'll follow you to the hospital." Hours later, after emergency procedures and endless questions, the storm outside began to fade. Naomi sat quietly in the waiting area, her clothes still damp, her mind heavy with exhaustion. She didn't belong in that expensive hospital wing. Everything about it screamed privilege and power. But she stayed anyway. Eventually the boy appeared again, his face pale but his eyes brighter now. "He's awake," he said softly. Naomi nodded and stood, following him into the private suite. Richard Lennox was sitting up in bed, oxygen tubes in his nose, monitors beeping gently beside him. He looked weaker, older, but his voice still carried authority. "You're the doctor?" he asked. Naomi nodded. "Yes, sir. Dr. Naomi Carter. You went into cardiac arrest. You were lucky your son got you help in time." The man studied her carefully. "You saved my life." She hesitated, unsure what to say. "I just did my job." But there was something strange in his gaze, curiosity, confusion, maybe even gratitude hidden behind pride. His son stepped forward. "Dad," she didn't hesitate. "She ran through the storm to help you. She didn't even ask who you were." Richard looked at her again, almost as if he couldn't believe someone had done something for him, without expecting anything in return. Finally, he said quietly, "Then I owe you more than a thank you." Naomi shook her head. "No, sir. Just take care of yourself. That's enough." She turned to leave, but his son spoke up again. "Wait, please. I want you to stay. Just until he's better." Naomi hesitated. "I have a clinic to run," she said gently. The boy's voice broke slightly as he said, "Please, ma'am." "You saved him. I can't do this without you." Something in the way he said it, so raw, so sincere, made her pause. She turned back slowly. "All right," she said finally. "Just for a little while." The boy smiled through his tears, and for the first time that night Naomi felt something stir inside her chest. Not pride, not relief, but something deeper. She didn't know it yet, but her decision to stay would change everything, for her, for the boy, and for the man whose life she had just pulled back from the edge. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the storm in their lives was only beginning. 3 days passed since the night Naomi saved Richard Lennox's life. The billionaire's private hospital suite was now quiet, the storm replaced by morning light streaming through tall glass windows. Naomi had barely slept, staying nearby in case his condition worsened. She wasn't supposed to be there anymore. Her work was at her small community clinic miles away, but something about the look in his son's eyes that night had kept her from leaving. Every morning the boy brought her coffee and tried to smile, though worry never left his face. His name was Ethan Lennox, 17, polite and kind despite his wealth. There was something humble about him that Naomi admired. He wasn't like the arrogant, careless sons of privilege she'd seen on TV. That morning, Naomi checked Richard's vitals and adjusted his IV drip. "Your heart's getting stronger," she said. "You need rest, not stress." Richard, pale but alert, gave a quiet grunt. "Rest isn't exactly in my nature, doctor." She smiled faintly. "Then you'll have to learn." He studied her for a moment, his sharp blue eyes softened by something he didn't quite recognize. Gratitude mixed with discomfort. "You know," he said finally, "most doctors wouldn't have come out that night. Not to that part of town. You didn't even ask who I was." Naomi shrugged. "Didn't matter. You needed help. That's all I saw." Richard looked at her hands, steady, confident, and then at the faded badge on her coat. Free Care Clinic, Southside Medical Center. "You work there?" he asked. "Yes," she replied. "We treat people who can't afford hospitals like this." His brows furrowed. "And you do that?" "Every day." "Every day," she said simply. He looked away, almost embarrassed. For a man used to power and control, being saved by someone from the world he barely noticed was humbling in ways he couldn't admit out loud. When Naomi stepped out of the room, she found Ethan waiting in the hallway. He looked relieved to see her. "He's really getting better, isn't he?" he asked. Naomi nodded. "He is, but he's still fragile. You should keep him away from stress." Ethan chuckled softly. "That's like asking a lion not to roar." She smiled at that, and for a brief moment, they both laughed, a small relief after days of tension. Later that afternoon, while she was organizing some medication, Ethan came to her with something in his hands, a small silver watch. "My dad wanted to give you this," he said. Naomi frowned. "I can't take that." "Please," he insisted. "He said you saved more than his life. You saved our family." She hesitated, then gently pushed the watch back into his hands. "Tell him thank you, but he doesn't owe me anything." Ethan looked down, clearly frustrated. "Why are you so humble?" he asked quietly. "Because life isn't about what people owe you," she said softly. It's about what you can give. That night, while Richard slept, Naomi found herself sitting in the empty hospital garden outside. The air was cool and quiet, the city lights distant. She thought about her clinic, the cracked walls, the broken equipment, the people waiting in long lines every morning just to be seen. She thought about how many times she'd almost given up. But seeing Ethan's hope, seeing Richard fight to breathe, it reminded her why she'd chosen this path. She didn't save lives for money or praise. She did it because no one else would. Unbeknownst to her, Ethan had come out to find her. He stood a few feet away, watching her stare at the night sky. "Do you ever stop working?" he teased softly. Naomi turned and smiled. "Not really. Doctors don't get that luxury." He walked closer and sat beside her. "I've been thinking," he said, "when my dad gets better, I want to help people too, not just live in that mansion pretending the world outside doesn't exist." She looked at him surprised. "You mean that?" He nodded. "You showed me something real, Dr. Carter. You didn't care who we were, and that means more than anything." She didn't know what to say. The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. "If that's really what you want," she said finally, "start small. You don't need billions to do good. You just need a heart that cares." Ethan smiled faintly. "I think I learned that from you." The next morning, everything changed. Richard woke up stronger, demanding his phone, his laptop, his schedule, as if he hadn't nearly died. Naomi tried to stop him. "You can't jump back into work yet," she warned, but he waved her off. "I've been through worse." His arrogance had returned, but there was a flicker of something new beneath it, a subtle respect for the woman who'd saved him. Later that day, while Naomi was preparing to leave, a man in a suit approached her outside the hospital. "Dr. Carter," he said, "Mr. Lennox asked me to deliver this." He handed her an envelope. Inside was a check, the amount so large it made her breath catch. It was enough to rebuild her entire clinic, maybe even open a new one. But along with it was a note written in sharp handwriting, "For your kindness." No strings attached. Naomi stared at it for a long moment, then folded the check neatly and put it back in the envelope. That evening she walked into Richard's room, holding it out. "I can't accept this," she said. Richard raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" "You earned it." "I didn't do it for money," she said quietly. "If you really want to thank me, help the people who can't afford your hospitals." The billionaire stared at her, surprised. No one had ever turned down his money before. Not once. Ethan was watching from the corner, his eyes wide. Naomi placed the envelope on the table beside the bed. "Take care of your heart, Mr. Lennox," she said softly. "And take care of your son. He's got a good one." Then she turned and walked out, her footsteps echoing down the long white corridor. Ethan ran after her. "You're leaving?" he asked. "You don't have to." "I do," she said. "This isn't my world," he shook his head. "You belong anywhere you make a difference, and you already did here." Naomi smiled gently. "Then that's enough." As she stepped into the elevator, she caught one last glimpse of the boy, standing tall, watching her go, as if something inside him had changed forever. She didn't know it yet, but this wasn't the end of their story. It was only the beginning of something far bigger, something that would test every choice they'd made and every truth they believed in. Outside, the rain began again, light and steady, the sound of something being washed clean, ready for what came next. 2 weeks passed since Naomi walked out of that private hospital, choosing her small broken clinic over luxury and wealth. The days were long, the nights longer, but for her it was peace. Her patients returned every morning, tired mothers with sick babies, old men who couldn't afford prescriptions, and children with laughter that made the world seem lighter. She had seen too much to expect miracles. She worked, she healed, and she kept moving forward. But one evening, just as the sun dipped behind the city, a black limousine pulled up outside her clinic. The entire block went silent. No one ever saw a car like that in this neighborhood. Naomi was inside, stitching a wound on a young boy's arm when she heard the door open. "Dr. Carter?" a voice called softly. She turned, and there he was, Ethan Lennox, dressed simply but still unmistakably out of place. He smiled awkwardly. "I hope I'm not interrupting." Naomi blinked, startled but not unkind. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" The boy's face brightened. "I came to see your clinic. You said once that doing good starts small. I wanted to start here. He held up a cardboard box. Inside were medical supplies, real ones, new, clean, the kind her clinic hadn't seen in years. Where did you get these? She asked, amazed. I asked my dad, he said. Told him I didn't want his money for a car or a vacation. I wanted him to help you. Before Naomi could respond, another figure stepped inside, older, tall, composed, his presence filling the small space. Richard Lennox, the same man who had once looked at her like she didn't belong, was now standing quietly in the doorway, watching her with a different kind of gaze. You were right, he said. About everything. Naomi straightened slowly, uncertain. I didn't mean to insult you, Mr. Lennox. You didn't, he replied. You showed me something I'd forgotten. Humility, humanity. She didn't know what to say. For a long moment, silence hung between them. The billionaire looked around the tiny clinic, peeling paint, flickering lights, shelves filled with donated supplies. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a folder. I had my board draft this, he said, handing it to her. Inside were papers, legal documents and architectural plans. Naomi frowned. What is this? A partnership, he said simply. The Lennox Foundation will fund a new wing for your clinic. Free medical care, expanded staff and equipment. But it stays yours. You run it your way. Naomi's throat tightened. Mr. Lennox, I can't. You can, he interrupted gently. Because this isn't charity. It's gratitude. You saved my life. Now I want to save others the way you do. For the first time, she saw sincerity in his face, stripped of pride. Ethan smiled beside him. Told you he'd listen eventually. For a long time, Naomi said nothing. She looked around at the small faces waiting outside the door, patients she had known for years, families she'd kept alive through sheer will and faith. Slowly, she nodded. All right, she said softly, but on one condition. No press, no cameras, no names on walls. This clinic isn't about power. It's about people. Richard smiled faintly. Deal. Over the following months, the transformation began. Construction crews came, doctors volunteered, and the small clinic that once struggled to survive became a beacon of hope for the forgotten corners of the city. Naomi worked harder than ever, but now she wasn't alone. Ethan came every weekend, learning how to assist, talk to patients, and organize community drives. He became the bridge between two worlds, the wealthy and the struggling, and Naomi couldn't help but feel proud watching him grow. One afternoon, months later, as sunlight poured through the windows of the new clinic, Richard arrived quietly. His health had improved, his face looked softer, calmer. He found Naomi treating a young girl, her hands steady as ever. When she finally looked up, he said quietly, "You've built something extraordinary." She smiled. "We built it," he nodded, then hesitated. "You know, when I collapsed that night, I thought I was dying alone. All the money in the world couldn't save me. But you came without hesitation. You gave me something I never had before." "What's that?" she asked. "Faith," he said simply. Naomi looked at him, speechless. For a moment, there was nothing but understanding, the kind that only exists between two people who've seen life from opposite sides of the same coin. "Maybe," she said softly, "it wasn't just your life that needed saving." He smiled faintly. "Maybe not." Later that day, as Naomi locked up the clinic, she saw Ethan handing out food bags to the kids outside, laughing as they surrounded him. The billionaire's son, once sheltered, privileged, untouchable, now kneeling in the dirt helping strangers like they were family. She felt something warm bloom in her chest. The world hadn't changed overnight, but something real had shifted. As the sun set, painting the sky gold and crimson, Naomi stood by the clinic sign, Free Care Community Health Center, sponsored by the Lennox Foundation. She traced her fingers over the words, her eyes soft but proud. Somewhere deep inside, she knew this was only the beginning. And as if on cue, she heard Ethan call out behind her, "Dr. Carter! We're going to need more hands tomorrow. The line's already forming for the morning." She laughed, shaking her head. "Then I guess we'd better be ready." The camera fades out on her smile, calm, steady, full of purpose. A woman who didn't just save a billionaire's life, she changed his world. And maybe, without knowing it, he changed hers too.